It's just really about, being, understanding, not taking action actually, because I think sometimes we think being bold is adding more to our plate when it actually is taking on less and maybe getting some things off of the plate that aren't adding value to your life or your business or your relationships.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Gallagher. Leigh Burgess, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. Great to have you on the show. Looking forward to chatting with you about your book today. You got a big old copy of it behind your shoulder there. But first, I just want to ask how you're doing.
I'm doing well. I think I'm just right, left, keep moving forward. And very, very close to Pub Day, which is 39 days away. So a lot going on and excited about it, not complaining about it. Just really kind of keeping the energy up and moving forward.
Yeah, as we record this, I know you're going through that tour right now, and that can be a lot of fun. And then you remember, like, what did I say on that podcast? What did I say on that episode?
What
I'm sure
state am
that's
I
there.
in?
As it's right, that too. As we release this episode, though, it is on the day that your book releases. So I'm excited about that for you, and I know you're
Thank
excited
you.
about it as well. And these days between the interview and when that releases are going to go by fast. I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. So, but I'll start you off with the same question. I always start off all my first time guests on the Uncommon Leader podcast. And that's tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
Yeah, so that's a good one. So I think there's lots of things. I think one of my boldest moments, I think, was in second grade when I was on the boys' soccer team. There wasn't girls' sports at that time, and my mom knew I wanted to play soccer. I tried ballet, but was really bad at it. So she's like, let's try a sport. And so, not that ballet is not a sport, but it wasn't a sport for me. And so I think I went out on that field not knowing I wasn't supposed to be there. And my mom kind of did that throughout my life, kind of putting me in spaces that maybe, from a sense of the society, or culture or safety or expectation that, girls don't play with the boys. And there were four girls that actually were in the league, but I went all out. I would get laid out on the field. I love soccer very much. And at one point, my mom and got called over, and I remember it because you're in second grade, like you remember these things. And they said she needs to play like a girl. She needs to play much softer, or she's going to get hurt. They were concerned about my safety. And my mom says she's going to play, just period. And I just remember that. And for me, I guess I just kind of have taken that thread through the rest of my life. Like I'm just going to play. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to share my voice and what I feel. So I think that has really kind of pulled me into some of the places as I've gone through a lot of my career in the corporate world and, having a voice and feeling like it was welcomed. And I think being an entrepreneur, it's another level of leadership that I'm using that boldness as well.
Oh, you have absolutely had to use that. And it comes out certainly in the story behind your book. We're going to get into the framework of it. But
Okay.
the title is Be Bold Today, Unleash Your Potential, Master Your Mindset, and Achieve Success. So who did you write this book for, and why did you write it? Why now?
Yeah, I think it was really written by me for me. It's what I used to help me figure out what's next after I quit without a plan in the middle of 2020. So I got to a point in my corporate career where I just ran really hard and ignored all the warning signs of you need to slow down, you need to not do that, you need to do more or less of this. And I just was in complete burnout and didn't even know what to name it. We talk about it now much more than we did 4 years ago. And it is definitely a part of your mental health, your physical health, just about every level of health of mine was just deteriorated. And I didn't have any other choice but to just change pretty quickly at that point. And I didn't know what to do. And I'm usually an A through double Z planner, and I didn't have a first step, second step. I love to follow a process, and I'm all about acronyms. It's actually how I've learned a lot of the things in college and high school and middle school. I was acronyming everything to remember it and to be able to figure it out for the test. So created that, but really what I had to dig into first and to heal and nurture myself because it wasn't just like jump back in because I was that burnt out. I needed to really work on my belief system. And that's why it starts with the B. And so my belief is really where I spent a lot of time with myself, with my coach, and really started to dig into some of the things that I didn't even know were there, were some shadows, some things that were possibly able to, boost me forward that I maybe wasn't leveraging as much. And then maybe some things like negative self-talk, some negativity or not feeling enough that were holding me back. And then, going into ownership, learning, and design, really, it just for me kind of flowed through the process that I took.
I like that. I mean, again, and even if we took a step back prior to that, you mentioned well, first of all, it'd be bold to make the leap out of the corporate world. I was given a little bit of a runway in terms of some of that change. I mean, 2020 had changed for a lot of folks. Yours might
Right.
have been a little bit different in terms of COVID and how it changed. And I worked in healthcare as well.
Yeah.
Couldn't get in hospitals and clinics to do the consulting work that we wanted to. So
Right.
eventually we ran out of work. But the bold step that you made is ultimately to step away from it
Hmm.
and learn. Prior to that, you mentioned the word burnout, a different B, but the word burnout. What
Hmm.
were some of the symptoms that you were experiencing that told you that you were burning out that might help others? You mentioned you wrote the book for yourself, but that might help
Yeah.
others realize that they might be experiencing burnout.
Yeah, I think over probably a period of 3 years, as I look back, I started to not be aligned with my values. And that's probably the first one, meaning like, so family, time, health, moving, being outside, not being at your desk, really having presence in your life. I really start to, thinking of a downslide that really just continued to downslide where it ended up in the middle of 2020 is I was working easily 17 hours a day.
Hmm.
And that is not healthy on so many levels. I gained a lot of weight. So I gained 67 pounds that I had lost back, plus then some.
Hmm.
I've lost half of that now. So, and on my, healthy journey back to me. And I think that was a big thing. And that really stemmed from not moving and being at my desk. And that period of time, there was just so much going on and wanting to help and feeling this huge sense of responsibility. So I think my relationships and presence, not eating or moving and being healthy. And then I think the other things is like small things started to irritate me more than they normally would because I am normally a go with the flow, we'll figure it out. And I just was just not me. And so I think I just really got to a point and I was in a meeting and I, was advocating, something was happening and, I just felt very strong about it. And it was a very tense time in general, for healthcare and some of the things that we were trying to do. And I walked out of the meeting and my vessel in my eye had burst.
Oh,
So I looked in the mirror and I was like, you can't do this. Like, so from the blood pressure and just being like stressed out, like, my body was telling me, you've got to make a change. So I felt like that was a sign.
well, I think, again, and as I think about it, one of the things that I often think it's that decision at the start, whether it's a sign or not, but it's
Yeah.
ultimately the pain of remaining the same where you are
Yeah.
is greater than the pain of the actual change itself, being bold and making a leap into doing something for yourself. And
Yeah.
you finally had reached that point where that pain to stay where you were was greater than, any change you were going to have to do to
Yeah.
be, we'll call it more successful, even in your last step in terms of designing that life. But
Right.
I often think about that, because I went through a fitness journey myself back in 2017. The 80 pounds, or you mentioned the 67 pounds. I don't know why it is that stress generally ends up adding weight, and maybe it's
Mhm.
it's like that stress eating the peanut M&Ms laying around or whatever that is.
The
But it's
spaghetti
like the
at eight
hardest thing.
o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, late night eating. Certainly, if you're
Yeah.
working 17 hours a day,
Yeah.
the fitness space doesn't allow you to get your exercise time in or your sleep.
Yeah.
Realizing as we move up into more wisdom years, that sleep becomes even more and more important. So I appreciate you sharing kind of what you went through, and I'm sure those that you work with now, you're able to help them recognize when they feel some of those things as well. Your opportunity to help others with this book. And you
Hmm.
mentioned before we hit the record button that there are stories of success that are inside of your book as well. Do you
Hmm.
have a favorite story of helping somebody else that's been a journey for them based on using your framework that they feel really good about and they ultimately you feel good about as well?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I think one that just came to the top of mind as you were asking the question is, obviously everyone's bold journey is personal. So what I did, I don't recommend, honestly, because I got to a point
Hmm.
of no return and my cost of inaction was really, so high that I had to take action. So I like when people learn it sooner, and they have a process or plan and they have a runway that's longer. But what happens, I think, in the example I have is, someone was in a space within an organization where they weren't aligned with their values. They felt they couldn't, go to the next level or maybe go at the same pace that they wanted to go. They felt that they weren't as valued, and leadership had changed quite a bit. And they began to create that plan to exit. And 99% out of all the people that I've worked with, all the women, all the organizations, once you write it down, once you make that plan, I always warn them, you say this is going to take 2 years, it's probably going to speed up, right? You're going to start going right, left, like I've talked about, you're going to move forward into this, and then you're going to be like, okay, that gave me some confidence. Now I feel more agency. I'm going to take the next bold step. And I saw someone really progress extremely quickly through their plan, where they had planned to do it over a year and a half. They ended up doing it over 6 months, which is one of, like, I would say, the premier cases I have of someone actually starting their business, leaving the corporate world. That was their example,
Hmm.
and really kicking it off, and then digging in and doing the work, which any year of any role is, first year is hard, but I think the first year as an entrepreneur for me, it just, the first 365, there's a book title. I think
There you go.
it's really interesting how much you dig into certain parts and you uncover pieces of yourself that you didn't know you needed to work on, or maybe you didn't even know were there, in the sense of tenacity and resilience. So that's probably my example. Just someone really went through it very quickly, and they are now, a regular six-figure contract individual and very, very happy. And they've also taken the different pieces and parts of the framework and placed it into other areas of their life, like their relationships and what they're curious about outside of work, and which is a nice alignment too that wasn't there.
It's so cool when it can overlap, when you can use those frameworks at both
Hmm.
to be successful in business or in work and in life as well.
Right.
Because the steps really are, as you mentioned, you're a process person. The steps to personal success or organizational success can be very similar. And if we follow that process, we have the likelihood of success. You mentioned in an earlier response as well, you used a coach through this. So, how did a
Mhm.
coach help you? And what's your advice to folks in thinking about utilization of a coach as well?
Yeah, so I've used coaches throughout my career. I think you need different kind of coaches at different points in your life, personally and professionally. I was looking for one who looked at me as a whole person. So
Hmm.
not just my title, not just as an executive, not just my mindset, not just my health, but like everything. And that's, whether that's a lifestyle coach. I mean, they have all these different titles now. And I think for me, I just needed someone that was really going to see me as a whole person and also help me get my business kicked off. So someone who was entrepreneurial themselves and knew kind of the business side. And she was incredible. And I didn't jump into that right away. Like I actually just took probably a full month just to breathe, as silly as that may sound. But I needed to like start sleeping normally and actually see sunlight and not have a vitamin D deficiency. Like I just needed to get
Hmm.
out there. And so I really, started looking for a coach around November and had already really started to create funnels and ideas. I think that's one of the things too, is I really had this freedom of thought and innovation, and that I never, not that I wasn't, able to think or, innovate within healthcare, but my particular field, which is clinical research, it's very much black and white of what to do and not to do. Research itself is innovative, but the ops and admin around it are very
Hmm.
defined. And so for me, it was like ability to use pieces of my brain that, had not been turned on in a while. And the lights were on, and not every idea was a good idea now, but they were out there.
Love that. When you think about going through the steps of believe, own, learn, design, you talked about those. The ones that I highlighted just in terms of reading about it myself is
Hmm.
on the learn side, embrace continuous learning. So
Hmm.
how do you embrace continuous learning? And there's a bit of mindset in there as well, but also the continuous growth as a
Right.
leader.
Yeah, we hear a lot about growth mindset, right? And fixed mindset. And Carol Dweck, she's still impacting us today with research that she did many, many years ago. But I think the key thing with the growth mindset is understanding when you're getting stuck and knowing the signs to when you might be in this fixed place of thought. So an example of that for me would be when I was thinking when I'm in this, career, what I'm supposed to do, what's been prescribed as the next step and the next step, how you get promoted and get the titles and all of that. I really had a fixed mindset about what was possible. I never thought about being an entrepreneur. I never thought about, doing things on my own. It seemed very unstable. It seemed extremely risky. And I'll use the word I felt selfish. So I felt like, who am I to just do that? Just try something with so much depending on me, my family, and, our livelihood, etc. And it didn't feel right. So like that was a fixed mindset for sure. So why I have that, one is I'm a big time learner myself, in the sense of just wanting to like soak up as much as I can, read as much as I can, and have as much context. But putting it into action is really, really important, and making the data and the inputs usable, but still trusting your gut. And it's hard to kind of, is it a 50-50? Is it a 90-10? And unfortunately it depends, asterisk.
Mhm.
So you can't like tell someone, well, what, some exact algorithm of how to use your mindset in that learning phase and with your growth mindset. But I think it's more notable to realize when you're in that fixed mindset, which I'm usually not, but that was an example of something that kept me in the role or kept me in the space I was in much longer than I probably needed to be.
I like that because again, well, as much as again as coaches and consultants, we'd love to have the matrix that shows exactly when to make those decisions, right? And
Right?
the risk is totally eliminated, and we won't have any risk. And that
Yeah.
certainly would be when somebody figures that out. Much like Dweck and her research on mindset, we're going to make a lot more money than we do now. But until that happens, we're stuck with having to use our gut to make some decisions at times as well, given all the information that we have. Now, you touched on this a little bit with regards to recognizing uh, when you're in a fixed mindset, and so that was one of the specific questions I wanted to ask you because you think
Mhm.
about where you were back in 2020 and the feeling that you had, the recognition of the burnout that you had. How are you intentionally reviewing or reflecting to ensure that you're not sliding back into that space? How do you make sure that you're assessing all the time whether or not you're being too bold, maybe?
Right. Yeah, I think for me, burnout it doesn't end just because you leave a job. It's what you were doing. It's what your habits that you had created. And so I think, I really hone in on my habits, because if I'm sitting at my desk and I haven't gone outside in 5 days, like literally gone out the door, I think it's probably a time to kind of step away and do something different and reset and realign my habits. So I think I really hone in on what I'm doing that kind of got me to that place of burnout, which for me was that being at the desk. Because in any role, most likely, but really as an entrepreneur, you could work 24 hours a day.
Hmm.
And I feel like I needed to like manage myself. And so from that perspective, I think the other thing that comes into mind when it comes to recognizing when I'm in a fixed mindset, am I doing the same thing over and over and it's not working, but I keep doing it? And I know that's called insanity, but a lot of us do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing that in my role where I was just what worked in the past when I got to these situations was I took on more responsibility. I took more, in air quotes, control of the situation. I tried to fill the gaps that existed with my time, my effort. Like if we didn't have a team member, I'll do it. So those things all worked before in some form or fashion, but now they were actually adding to the fuel of the fire of the burnout. And I just kept doing them over and over and over. And I'm not sure if what happened to me in that month, if it had not happened to me, the situations, the conversations, I don't know if I would have kept trying because I actually thought I could succeed. I didn't think I could fail. Like if I try hard enough, I'll succeed because that had worked in the past. So when you're doing something over and over and you're still like something's got to give, like maybe it's you need to like step back and what's got to give is you're stuck and you're stuck in a fixed mindset right now about whatever it is you're working on and need to kind of think about how do you transition or pivot to the growth side.
Yeah, I love that as a formal kind of review process, whether it's a weekly check in with yourself, a
Hmm.
monthly, or even quarterly formal that says, what have I done in the last 3 months? How many times have I gotten to the gym
Yeah,
to understand if I'm taking care of my fitness, or even these silly things that track how many steps
exactly.
we have in a day, and understanding what we're doing, and ultimately allowing us to adjust is very important. And to your point, especially on the entrepreneurial side, taking the time to do that
Hmm.
often feels like a chore, but the gift that is what can come out of that reflection so that you don't go back to where you were is very important. That stickiness that keeps you, if you will, in the space of being bold and going forward. Your book has come out, folks are going to read it. What do you want them to feel, and what do you want them to do after reading your book?
I want them to feel inspired and see the power of possibility when they believe in themselves. I want them to understand and to do what is right for them because it's a very personal journey. And I think there's a myth about being bold. There's five that I talk about in the book, but one of them is, it's too late to be bold. I've already, I was in a
Mm,
career almost 25 years and, I had achieved C-suite and greater success and, greater responsibility and six figures here and there, so like by all the external signs, I was successful. But I think internally I was misaligned with my values and I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. So I was 48 then. And so it's usually not the time that someone makes a leap like that. But I'm finding more and more people, particularly around that age, and my understanding of even our happiness curve at 47 and 48 dips.
mm.
And they call it a midlife crisis, but I think it's more like a midlife awakening. I'm not sure if it's midlife anymore either, for some of us. So I think certainly for the future, maybe for us, but for our kids, no. So I think it's just kind of seeing the possibility and realizing that it's not too late, and you can take a small step. It doesn't have to be such a big step like I took, which is another myth of being bold, is that it's always big and loud and social media level. And no, a lot of my boldest moments actually are very quiet and they're my own and they're personal and they happen probably between my ears in the sense of what I need to do and how I need to move forward, or they happen in smaller groups, where actually I get powered up as an introvert in much smaller groups and being able to do that. So I think those are two things that I think really correlate with what people think it is. And I think the last thing, I think sometimes bold gets a bad rap, meaning that it's, a myth that it's thoughtless and that you just jump
Mm.
and you don't look. It is one of the most pragmatic things that I've ever done, because it wasn't just like I went in the office that day and quit my job. Like I had talked about it with my family. We had looked at our finances. We had said, what is the cost of inaction at this point, And I'd done, the things like to look for a job and do those things, but nothing was hitting. So I think sometimes when you hit a wall, like you should stop running into it.
Oh,
So,
love that. Yeah.
right? So I
Yep.
think for me, it was just realizing that just a small step, although mine was large, you can just take a step toward your goals. And that's all you need to define is the next step, not all 100.
Love that. And even just again to your point, those small steps, while bold does come across as big, and
Hmm.
and it should be big, there's still a process that you utilize
Hmm.
going through that. You mentioned you're a reader as well, and that goes along with the learning and the growth mindset. Is there a specific book that you've read maybe in the past couple of years that has had a specific impact on you and maybe even on your writing style? Tell me about your writing style. Uh,
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if he's impacted my writing style. So Ryan Holiday is someone that
mm,
I've definitely started just kind of going through, and he gets a book out a year, I think. So I haven't been through them all, but I think, one of them most recently was just about, being still. Because I
mm,
think one of the false negative beliefs I have about myself is that I'm not enough. I need to do more. I need to add more to the plate. I need to be more successful. And I think just believe it or not, I figured out where that may have come from at 52, and I didn't realize it until probably this year. And for me, I've just been trying to fill the gap, I think. And that I think goes back to when I was 6 and my brother was 11 and he passed away unexpectedly.
mm.
And I just wanted my parents to be happy and I didn't want them to ever be sad. And so I think even as a 6-year-old, although no one asked me, I just was always like doing my best and not performing, but like wanting them to never have to worry, be sad, or be upset. And so that meant filling the gap and doing as much as I could, which I then pulled into my career, which worked for a while, but ultimately led to burnout. And so in his book, most recently, it's just really about, being understanding, not taking action actually, because I think sometimes we think being bold is adding more to our plate when it actually is taking on less and maybe getting some things off of the plate that aren't adding value to your life or your business or your relationships. And so for me, that's impacted a lot, and just enjoy kind of reading about the Stoic way of life. And it's something I didn't know a lot about and just started to really pick up on his stuff.
Aggressively saying no to
Yeah.
new opportunities that are certainly cloaked in the fear of missing out.
Hmm.
What's an opportunity you've said no to in the past 6 months boldly and said, nope, not going to do that?
Traveling.
Yeah.
So even though I do a lot of traveling, I think what I travel for is very important because I'm choosing again to be away from my home, away from my family, my dogs, where I want to be, my values. And so that is a thing for me that I have to pay attention to because I think sometimes I would inconvenience myself for someone else's convenience. Oh, it works on this day for me. Oh, well, I can move 3 meetings and, not be here for that. And yeah, I can make that happen. That's how I used to be. And I think there's some people pleasing in that for sure that I'm again just kind of like figuring it out and things people see, but you don't see it, so you don't act on it. But I think that's definitely a choice I make of where am I going and why am I doing it and what's the impact. And it's not always I only go if I get paid or I only go if they buy books because I've done plenty of things where there's no guarantee of either. I just want to have scale of message and I really want people to hear my story so that they can take whatever they can take from it and apply it to their next step in their bold journey.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story with us and the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast today. Where folks, where can folks learn more about you, Leigh, and as well as find your book? Where do you want to go to get your book?
Yeah, so my website's the best place, and then you can pick wherever you prefer to buy books. I always encourage people to shop local, bookshop.org, your local bookstore. And then if you don't have any other choice, you can pick wherever you'd like to. But I think, from that perspective, my website has everything there, a little bit more about me and the things that we do in Bold Industries Group. And I would love for everybody to pick up the book. It's a great way
I'll
to
be
start off the new year too, from the perspective of ending the year, and beginning, your bold year for you in 2025.
Love that. And I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes to your website and to
Okay.
bookshop.org. I like that in terms of the local
Yeah.
bookshops, in terms of putting that in there. So, okay, I get one more question for you. You get the final word here, and I'm
Okay.
going to give you a billboard. You can put that billboard anywhere you want to. What's the message you're going to put on that billboard, and why do you put it there? It's probably going to be bold today, consider it's on the back, but you can't say
No,
be bold today.
that's everywhere. Yeah, no, that's everywhere. Yeah, that would be the first, right? No, I think for me, what came to mind as you're talking is, and it's not my quote, it's to begin, begin, meaning you have to take that first step. And that kind of encompasses the whole framework, your belief, your ownership, what you've learned, and how you're going to design your life really is all encapsulated in that first step. So whatever it is, whether it's learning or being curious or thinking through something, whether it's just writing it down, telling it to someone, taking a class, Googling it, take the first step. And to begin, begin.
Love that. To begin, begin. Leigh Burgess, thank you so much for sharing with us on the Uncommon Leader podcast. Wish you the best in the book launch and going forward as well.
Thank you so much for having me.